The Seahawks are no longer in control of their own destiny to make the postseason, but there's still a chance to win the NFC West. We're going to be taking a deep dive into Seattle's slim playoff hopes and what needs to happen both in Week 17 and Week 18 here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be teaming up here for our latest Monday installment with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're listening down in Sacramento, California, or across the country in Tallahassee, Florida, we greatly appreciate each and every one of you. The Seahawks taking a major shot when it comes to their playoff chances with a 3-point loss to the Vikings on Sunday. They obviously are not mathematically eliminated, but we're going to be taking a deep dive into what needs to happen for them to make the playoffs as an NFC West champion. Plus, we've got our Monday Musings looking back at yesterday's defeat at the hands of the Vikings. And we're going to be moving on to the Bears because we've got Thursday night football approaching. It's a jam-packed episode coming your way, courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks had control of their destiny going into Sunday's game against the Minnesota Vikings. But after losing by 3 points in their home finale at Lumen Field, that is no longer the case. And Mike McDonald's crew is going to need a little bit of help to get to the postseason. Obviously, they still have to get it done on their end. But, Rob, when you dive into the playoff scenarios, because the Rams won against the Jets yesterday to get their 9th win, the Seahawks are now what looks to be a game and a half out of first place because they have the tiebreaker that goes to the Rams with that one head-to-head matchup. They do play in Week 18, and I think a lot of fans just assume, well, if Seattle beats the Chicago Bears and then they beat the Rams, they're the NFC West champion. But unfortunately, that is not the case, and there's a lot of complexities to this when you're looking at tiebreakers that are going to make this a difficult situation for 12's stomach, because there is a strong possibility that even if the Seahawks win on Thursday night against the Bears, if the Rams win against the Cardinals on Sunday, that they'd be all but eliminated. There actually is a scenario where they could be eliminated from the playoffs in that scenario before these two teams even have a rematch at SoFi Stadium.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the loss to the Vikings and the Packers the week before really has put Seattle behind in this situation. I mean, the most likely scenario is that Seattle is going to be home for the playoffs. Let's just be very upfront and realistic about that. However, as far as the simplest scenario in which Seattle could wind up still winning the NFC West division is going to first rely on the Seahawks being able to beat the Chicago Bears in Soldier Field. So in cold, blustery Chicago 4 days from today. And then, of course, the Arizona Cardinals being able to do the Seahawks a little bit of a favor by beating the LA Rams, setting up that matchup at SoFi Stadium in LA against the Rams, where if the Seahawks were able to win that game, again, going 2-0, the Rams going 0-2 over the next couple of weeks, then Seattle could still be able to win the division. Again, there's going to have to be some other dominoes going to have to drop, but that is the easiest scenario. Otherwise, you're going to basically be having like a 12-team parlay kind of effect, and so again, it's very unlikely. And so again, the Seahawks fumbled away their opportunity, or maybe threw it up for grabs might be a better way of putting it. Their opportunity to be able to host and have one more game at home this season. As it stands right now, Corbin, that's looking very unlikely.
Yeah, according to the Upshot on the New York Times athletic website, the Seahawks have a 12% chance of making the postseason after losing the game to Minnesota yesterday. The Rams are at 88%. I guess if you're looking at a silver lining, the 49ers and Cardinals are both eliminated. Maybe that's not a silver lining from Arizona's perspective, because now you're pulling for the Cardinals to beat the Rams, and what do they have to play for? You're hoping they're like the Lions a couple years ago, and hey, it's a division rival, and we got a chance to still have a winning record. So let's go out and get it done. And they did beat the Rams earlier this season. So maybe they can do the Seahawks a solid and sweep them. But this is the crazy thing. If the Rams lose the game to the Cardinals, it doesn't matter what happens on Thursday night. In fact, that might be technically an easier way for the Seattle Seahawks to get into the playoffs with a 9-8 record, because if they lose to the Chicago Bears and you have the Rams losing to the Arizona Cardinals, then the tiebreaker changes to being the divisional record, which the Seahawks would be 4-2 if they beat the Rams. The Rams would be 3-3 if they lose this game to the Cardinals and then lose to the Seahawks in week 18. So that is ahead of strength of victory, which would be the tiebreaker if the Cardinals lose to the Rams, which right now the Rams have a 9-game advantage in that category, a significant gap. So you're going to need a bunch of results to play your way with teams that you beat earlier this season. You need to be rooting for the Denver Broncos. You got to be rooting for the New York Giants of all teams. Actually, the Giants beat them, so that doesn't count. But you're going to have to be rooting for some Broncos. You're going to have to root for, trying to think of the other teams they beat earlier. The Miami Dolphins, you need to win the last couple games. Any team that you beat earlier in the season that the Rams don't have a win over, you are going to need those teams to win as many games as possible here in the last 2 weeks, because right now you've got that huge gap in the strength of victory column, and a bunch of those games don't go your way. The Atlanta Falcons are another team that you are pulling for to end up finishing the season strong so that you continue to get more points in that strength of victory column. And of course, you can look at some teams that the Rams beat, like the Saints tonight at Green Bay. You don't want the Saints to upset the Packers, because if that happens, that pretty much ices the cake if the Rams are able to win on Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals. That would be a massive defeat for the Seahawks in a number of ways, because the Rams do have a win over the Saints, and that would boost their strength of victory percentage substantially. So it is leaning towards the Rams in that instance. It's not looking good, but the Seahawks, they got to take care of their business. You can make an argument that Thursday night ultimately doesn't matter, because if the Rams lose on Sunday and the Seahawks lose, as I said, then it creates a different tiebreaker, and week 18 truly is a win and get in situation. But they have got to get in the win column to at least give themselves a chance if the Rams beat the Cardinals on Sunday. If the Rams beat the Cardinals and the Seahawks lose, it's over. The Seahawks are out of the playoffs. So this is a huge game coming up against Chicago.
Yeah, and I guess this is one area, Corbin, where I'm going to differ from a lot of Seahawks supporters out there, is that, look, I would love for Seattle to qualify for the playoffs. I think that the scenario in which Seattle loses their final 4 games, which, of course, right now they've lost the last 2 again against Minnesota and Green Bay, now going to be facing on the road. And again, I mentioned Chicago and it being in the weather and on the road type of situation. Obviously, this being the holiday week, there are an awful lot of challenges about this week. I want to see Mike McDonald be able to bring this team back together after a loss that has got to just hit you in the stomach as hard as it possibly could. And so again, to me, obviously you want the Seahawks to be able to get back into the playoffs. I, more importantly, want to see this team kind of finish the season on a high note. Whether they are able to actually go to LA and beat the Rams a week and a half from now really doesn't matter right now. All that matters right now is the Chicago Bears. And so again, I want to see Seattle be able to do that, for one, hopefully create a situation where you're at least going to have a competitive game against the LA Rams where there's something on the line other than just pride. But even if it is just pride, then again, that's a divisional rival. At that point, it would be the NFC West divisional champion, and in a game that, frankly, when the Seahawks played the Rams previously, that they should have won that game. And so go back to LA and be able to hopefully beat up on a team that, even if they are going to be the ultimate division champs, then at least finish the season 1-1 against the divisional champs. So to me, that's what this kind of comes down to. Seattle had their opportunity in the playoffs. These last 2 games essentially were playoff games, and frankly, they got outclassed by 2 of the absolute best teams in the NFC. And so I don't think that there's any shame in that, especially considering the fact that this is a somewhat ragtag bunch of players and coaches that have basically all been thrown together. So to me, what's most important is kind of finishing on a high note. And that to me is going to be one of the most fascinating things over these last couple of weeks of the regular season.
When we come back, we are going to dish out our Monday musings, our in-depth takeaways coming out of Seattle's loss to Minnesota yesterday in their home finale at Lumen Field. Don't go away. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. When your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This upcoming week, I'm going to keep riding with Jared Goff with more than 250 passing yards, and I'm looking for a bounce-back game from Saquon Barkley with more than 1 combined touchdown. It's quick, simple, and so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDINNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be teaming up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week during this holiday season. The Seahawks suffering a huge defeat at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings. We were just talking, Rob, about how that dwindled the playoff chances for the Seahawks substantially, dropping this second straight game at home. And it was a game, look, I understand what you're coming from in terms of no shame, because both the Packers and the Vikings were double-digit victory football teams, but Seattle had so many chances to win this game yesterday. And I think for large stretches of this game, they were the better football team. And to see that game slip away, I don't feel quite the same way where you can feel no shame in it. I would be feeling shame. You had chances to win this game. The Vikings gave you chances to win this game, and you simply could not get the job done.
Yeah, no question about it. And I agree with you in a lot of ways there. I mean, this has got to be the most galling loss of the season. To me, even more than the New York Giants loss that a lot of people are bemoaning at this point. I really thought that, as you said, that the Seahawks played well enough to win. The Vikings gave you some opportunities. At the same time, to me, one of the things that I thought really stood out between Minnesota and Seattle was just the Vikings' poise on the road. When Sam Darnold, gets hit and has the penalty from Byron Murphy II, of course, with the face mask. I mean, the next play after the Fox cameras caught Sam Darnold basically kind of grimacing in pain, he gets up and throws an absolute strike. I mean, just a perfect throw. One of his 2 perfect throws to Jordan Jefferson for touchdowns in this football game. And so to me, that is again where the Vikings poise, really I thought stood apart from Seattle. It felt like Seattle lost this game more than the Vikings actually took it away from them. But I did think that the Vikings, their ability to kind of channel all of the negative emotion that was out there. I mean, there was an awful lot of smack talking going on both sides. You could just feel the intensity and pressure of this football game. And again, I think you got to kind of tip your cap to the Minnesota Vikings, their coaching staff, their certainly their personnel, the execution of their plays. They called some pretty gutsy plays. And the fact that they were able to escape what I thought was, again, one of Seattle's best played games in a lot of different ways and still get that victory. There's a reason why this club is shooting for the top seed in all of the NFC.
Yeah, you can look at the poise, and I think that boils down to also the penalties. Seattle had 11 of them in this game. They had 5 pre-snap offensive penalties at home in Week 16. As Mike McDonald was saying today, that's simply not good enough. And you can't be making mistakes like that on your home turf at this stage of the season. You shouldn't have those kind of procedural issues, but that continues to be an issue. Look, this is going to be taken. Some fans are going to say, whoa, this is a little bit harsh, or maybe it's a little bit blunt. But to me, this is the reality. And yesterday is just another game that I would chalk it up to. I think Ryan Grubb's stubbornness has cost the Seahawks multiple games this year. And I'm going to throw yesterday's game into that mix. You're playing a team that blitzes more than any team in the NFL, in the Minnesota Vikings. They're incredibly aggressive. They have one of the best pass rushes in the league, at least from terms of sacks. And for a good chunk of this game, Seattle's offensive line did a masterful job. They really did. They were giving Geno Smith tons of time to throw. Geno Smith gave himself time to throw, moving the pocket a number of times, did some depth things in that regard. But they ended the first half with 15 dropbacks and 6 runs. In the second half, they had 28 dropbacks and 9 runs. In both those cases, we're talking 75+% pass to run ratio. You are not going to beat most teams in the NFL, let alone an elite one like the Minnesota Vikings. You are not going to win games like that doing that. And you look at how things went in the fourth quarter. Mike McDonald's talking about today, the pass pro was great until the fourth quarter. They had opportunities in this game to be able to move the football on the ground and try to take some pressure off of their quarterback at less than 100%. And Ryan Grubb just simply refused to do it. And there's two examples that I talked about a little bit yesterday, watching the All-22 jump out even more to me. They had 1st and 5 in the fourth quarter past midfield. The Vikings had a 12 men on the field penalty. It's 1st and 5. And then they ran a double screen that the Vikings had sniffed out on both sides. It was never going to work. They lost 6 yards on that. Suddenly it's 2nd and 11. And they ended up having to punt on that drive. They didn't get a single point out of it. And then the second to last drive, Geno Smith gets first down completions to Noah Fant and Kenny McIntosh. They're down to the 37-yard line. And Mike McDonald today said that, chewing the clock up and trying to balance playing fast and forcing the Vikings maybe into calling timeouts, that was what they were hoping to do. But they had 1st and 10 at the 37, and they go into shotgun, have long developing routes again, and Geno Smith gets sacked. And the entire drive gets set back. 60-yard field goal missed by Jason Myers. I just feel like the lack of balance there, it cost him in the Giants game. It cost him in a number of other games. This one, I think, is as glaring as any, though, because they had 2 first down conversions in the run game in their final touchdown drive, and they weren't willing to go back to that at the end of the game when they very easily could have. And I think they win this game if they mix some runs in at the end of that second to last drive. I think they go down and score. But they keep putting their quarterback in a tough spot, and they made it easy for the Vikings. They could just pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. You had to expect that there was going to be sacks and there was going to be big plays like that when you didn't give any threat of the run there at the end of the game.
Yeah, no question about it. I think first off, when it comes to the running game, I mean, you were throwing out some numbers there as far as how many rushing attempts that Seattle had. Of course, 2 of those rushing attempts in the second half, one of them was a Geno Smith scramble, so it wasn't a traditional hand the ball off to the back. The other one was going for on 4th and 1 with Julian Love barely getting that. So the lack of push from Seattle's offensive line continues to obviously be, to me, the biggest issue for this club moving forward. So I think we have to acknowledge that. And then, as you said, I mean, Ryan Grubb's play calling, the double double screen that was called at that point, I thought was just kind of like something that looked like it was kind of made up in the sand. I didn't think that was a play that looked like it would be realistically successful. Typically when you're going to call a screen, you want to try and invite the pass rush. Inviting a pass rush on 1st and 5 just seems kind of counterintuitive. Like that's a down to either run the ball or perhaps go over the top, but not to set up a screen when, again, you're not likely to see much of a pass rush on a 1st and 5 type of a play. So again, I was kind of surprised by some of the play calling here from Ryan Grubb. But I also think that it's important that we kind of start to assign some blame here. I mean, I listened to a lot of Mike McDonald post game during the Mike McDonald show on one of our rivals in the sports media business in 710, but I got to give him some credit there for having that show. And then certainly a Mike McDonald's press conference that he had today. In virtually every situation, people are asking who was to blame for all the different mistakes that we saw. And Mike McDonald basically was willing to at least kind of acknowledge that there were some mistakes made, but was not going to say names. Well, I'll say some names. I mean, based on watching some of the film of the 3 plays that I think really turned this game on its ear, certainly the game winner. Again, I thought that it was an absolutely pinpoint pass, terrific poise, terrific ability to step up in the pocket, throw basically off of 1 foot and just lay it right over the top of Tariq Woolen as well as Julian Love. Frankly, I would put that mostly on Julian Love for his just inability to be able to get all the way over to cover that particular touchdown. The 2 interceptions from Geno Smith, frankly, I think that Geno Smith got to get the ball out quicker on both of them, frankly, but especially the very first one. I mean, he had the ball in his hands for an awful lot of time there. Noah Fant runs with it. In my opinion, a pretty lazy route. Noah Fant has to have some spatial awareness. He's got a rookie pass rusher in Dallas Turner, basically playing off-ball linebacker. He is right on his hip the whole time. You can feel Noah Fant feel Dallas Turner right there. And yet he still runs a pretty lazy route, not very sharp route. And Dallas Turner is able to jump ahead of it and intercept it. And then, of course, the late interception that sealed the game, Geno trying to throw the ball to DK Metcalf, same kind of thing. I'd like to see DK Metcalf cut that a little bit sharper towards the sideline. Seattle, of course, has to go about 50 yards if they're going to put themselves in a position to possibly get a game-tying field goal. You're going to have to get out of bounds. So why run more of a skinny post 45-degree angle kind of a thing? There should be like a 90-degree angle towards the sideline. To me, it basically gave the Minnesota safety an opportunity to, again, undercut the ball. Geno Smith ultimately is the guy as the quarterback who had the ball in his hands last, and obviously Minnesota was able to get 2 critical turnovers in that regard. But I didn't feel that Seattle's offensive line or that Seattle's pass catchers in that play helped him very much. And finally, the last play, as I just mentioned, Geno's interception thrown to Minnesota that sealed the game. Oluwatimi got absolutely smoked at the line of scrimmage. It was a quick spin move by Jihad Ward. I mean, Geno Smith had to get the ball out of his hands almost immediately. He threw up a prayer, and DK Metcalf wasn't able to answer that prayer.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Look, after the game, I thought, maybe DK Metcalf didn't run his route right. Going back and watching the All-22, we called that when I was coaching a sliver route, where it's an out route that's usually in the 20-yard range. And I was watching Dan Orlovsky breaking it down, and he had it 18 to 22. So in the same area, you're talking around a 20-yard out that is going to have that more of a banana turn rather than a quick cut to the sideline. On that play, DK Metcalf was only 12 or 13 yards into his route. He doesn't know that the football is coming because he's got that point where he's expecting to cut to the sideline. But because Oluwatimi missed that block, Geno Smith had to unload it then. And that gave the safety a chance with the receiver not being into his break. The safety can just easily undercut that ball and intercept it. So to me, the pass protection was the big issue there. I'm not pinning that one on Geno. I'm not pinning it on DK Metcalf at this point. And Julian Love, to me, it was the only one you can blame on that touchdown. Go back and watch it. He, for whatever reason, swiveled his hip towards the middle of the field when there wasn't another threat there. I don't understand what he's doing, especially with Justin Jefferson being the receiver that's on the outside. That should be your number 1, number 2, number 3 priority. Tariq Woolen actually in cover 2 went back deeper than he normally would. I'm not pinning that on Woolen at all. Julian Love's got to go over there and make a play, especially when it's Justin Jefferson. You cannot allow that to happen. He took a bad pursuit angle too once he realized that he was in that position, and the pursuit angle was just way too in front of the receiver, so he had no chance to make a play on the football. So to me, that's on him. And Geno, that first pick, it was a really bad throw. I didn't like the play design, and the Vikings sniffed it out because when Seattle runs play action a lot of the time, teams just aren't going to bite on it for the same reason I just mentioned, because you don't run the football and you don't make an effort to really make teams have to respect that part of your game. And that's what happens when you run 20% of the time instead of 30 or 40%. And they had some success running the ball in that game, especially in the second half. I just don't understand it. When we come back, we are going to flip the script on to week 17. The Seahawks and the Bears will be playing Thursday night football in the Windy City. We're going to tell you what's new here for the Chicago Bears. That'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Get ready for the final 2 weeks of the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Bet on everything from Geno Smith going into this next game with Caleb Williams, and both of them combining for 5 or more touchdowns on Thursday Night Football, or DK Metcalf being the first skill player to find the end zone at Soldier Field. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He is Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s tuning in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It is on to week 17. As we've mentioned, the Seahawks are on the brink of elimination. Slim playoff odds after losing to the Vikings, but there is still a chance, a 12% chance, according to Upshot, that the Seahawks can still win this division. And I know there's a scenario where losing to the Chicago Bears, the Seahawks can still get in if the Arizona Cardinals beat the LA Rams, but that's just putting another thing in the corner that you need a team to help you out. The Seahawks need to go out and get a win. They need to go out and win a football game. And the Chicago Bears on the road, look, the Bears have won 4 games. They have been reeling. They fired Shane Waldron, former Seahawks offensive coordinator. The offense hasn't necessarily been that much better since they made that move. This has been a team that has been struggling, particularly in the offensive side of the ball. They've got a defense that can make plays, and the defense has been put in some really bad spots this year. This is, I don't want to say a trap game, because nothing should be a trap game when you are battling for your playoff lives, especially the Seattle Seahawks coming off back-to-back losses. You have got to have this one. But Chicago playing in the elements. It doesn't look like it's going to be quite as cold as what it could have been. The Midwest has had a cold spell this week, but you're hoping that the weather doesn't play too much of a factor here. But the Seahawks are going to be playing on the road, a tough place to win in December against a Bears team that has plenty of talent. It just hasn't translated to wins, especially in the last couple months of the season.
Yeah, Corbin, if this game was being played in Seattle, if it was being played in a dome and the elements were not an issue, I still would argue that this is a really spooky game for the Seahawks in a lot of different ways. As you said, the Chicago Bears have had a great deal of turnover. Matt Eberflus, of course, was their head coach. Shane Waldron was their offensive coordinator, and then neither of them are employed by the team. It's now Thomas Brown as the head coach and Chris Beatty as offensive coordinator. And we've seen the Chicago Bears kind of simplify their offense a little bit, try to pound the rock a little bit more since that Beatty has taken over for Waldron as the play caller. To me, what's fascinating about the Bears, obviously, is the number 1 overall selection in Caleb Williams. His improvisational ability is something that we have seen the Seahawks pass rush be so inconsistent, and so quarterbacks who are able to kind of keep that poise the way that Sam Darnold did, and a quarterback who has the talent that Caleb Williams has, given the wide receiver talent that he has there. I think it makes it a scary matchup. Certainly, Seattle has been vulnerable to the tight ends. That was one of the, I thought, the kind of silver linings to this loss is that, and one of the reasons why Julian Love may have been caught flat-footed a little bit. I think that he was thinking he would be playing a little bit more in the interior. I mean, that was a 39-yard touchdown strike again for Darnold to get that game winner. I think that, again, the Bears are a team that has a lot of talent and a lot of the skill positions, and their struggles are really along the offensive line when it comes to offense. So a mirror image of the Seahawks, except they have a quarterback who is just starting his career rather than, kind of wrapping things up here with Geno Smith, or at least in the second stage of his career. So to me, they're fascinating in that regard. And then defensively, they got playmakers in the secondary, and they have a pass rush that can really get after you. Montez Sweat remains one of the NFL's best, longest pass rushers. He's got really long arms, and just knowing the way that Geno Smith sometimes can, have some mistakes when he gets a little bit of pressure in his face, then again, this is a pretty formidable team, one that's much better than their record would indicate.
Yeah, going with Caleb Williams first off, that's obviously storyline number 1 going into this week. And I asked Mike McDonald about defending him today because, look, yeah, you played Kyler Murray twice this year. You've played a few quarterbacks that can move. But Caleb Williams is really the first what I call sandlot quarterback that they've played, because that's not really Kyler Murray's game. He can obviously do a lot of damage running the football, but he is not that guy that is going to be back there Russell Wilson again. I think Russell Wilson was more of that Sandlot type quarterback, especially early in his career, that can hold on to the ball and move around for 10, 11 seconds back there. That's what Caleb Williams does. And he is a bigger quarterback than Kyler Murray. So he is able to see downfield better, attack the middle of the field. He can break tackles more easily with his power. He's just a different style player than what the Seahawks have seen this year. Now, he'll try to be playing hero ball, and he'll make some mistakes. He'll throw picks. He'll throw balls into double coverage, but he'll also make scintillating plays where he's had the ball for 15 seconds and somehow he gets away from 5 pass rushers and then throws a 60-yard pass, and he's capable of doing that. So getting him down, containing him is going to be critical, because more so even than Kyler Murray, this is a quarterback that loves to get outside of the pocket and then wreak havoc with his ability to play that Sandlot style football. And he's got some good receivers. He got DJ Moore. They brought in Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, former Washington receiver, their other first-round pick, who's had a pretty good rookie season. He's got a very nice array of weapons, like Cole Kmet at tight end. They've got a lot of different pieces that he can throw to. DeAndre Swift out of the backfield can do a little bit of everything as well. The offensive line has been the biggest question. If Seattle can corral him and not let Caleb Williams have a bunch of plays where he can get off schedule and play out of structure, which he seems most comfortable with, then it gives you a much better chance to win the game, to create turnovers. But if you let him do his thing where he is able to run around and then make plays, coverage is only going to hold up so long, especially with the talent that the Bears have at the receiver and tight end positions. That is where Seattle could get in a lot of trouble in this game.
No question about it. Again, because the Chicago has the talent that they have, a pass catcher. When you're talking about guys like DJ Moore, like Rome Odunze, like Keenan Allen, I mean, those are 3 of the most individually talented wideouts in all of the league, in my opinion. I know that might sound a little bit like hyperbole, but you just look at what DJ Moore is. I mean, who on Seattle's secondary is going to match up with a guy who is as shifty as DJ Moore? I mean, to me, that would be Devin Witherspoon. But if you take Devin Witherspoon away from the interior of the defense, then Chicago's likely going to be able to run the ball an awful lot. That's one of the things that Minnesota did, and Seattle decided to use Witherspoon inside more. That's why only a couple of those routes that Justin Jefferson got free was Devin Witherspoon, the corner, assigned to him. Keenan Allen has been one of the absolute best in terms of just the slot for an awful long time, and obviously Rome Odunze. Anybody here in the Washington area knows what Rome Odunze is. 6'3", 215 pounds. He has the size to be able to box out a Tariq Woolen, who I thought played fairly well in this game, but the fact that he was not in the starting lineup, to me, that is, again, one of the things that we talked about in the very beginning of the show, Corbin, that I thought basically kind of encapsulated Seattle's season. Talented, but not necessarily poised when they needed it the most, and that's one of the reasons why now they are fighting for their absolute playoff lives instead of being prepared to be hosting a divisional football game in the playoffs.
These are the games, you're kind of, as a fan, you're hoping, hey, this team's been knocked out of the playoffs for several weeks. What do they have to play for? But Chicago's got a ton to play for. All these teams that are eliminated, you're trying to play. A lot of these guys are trying to play for a spot on the roster next year, or a spot on another team. Like, you have plenty to play for out there. And Chicago wants to finish the season strong. You want to finish strong with Caleb Williams and feel like we've got some positive momentum going into his second season, whoever the new coaching staff is going to end up being. So there's a lot to play for. This is going to be a game that, as we'll talk about on Matchup Tuesday coming up tomorrow, there are certainly some matchups that favor the Seahawks heavily, but this is a team in Chicago that's got a lot of weapons that you wonder about how the Seahawks are going to deal with them. So this is certainly not a game that you can sleep on. And again, they shouldn't be. You are on the brink of elimination. This is truly a game you have got to have in Chicago. And I don't care if there's that scenario you lose, you can still get in. Don't put yourself in a position where you absolutely have to have the Arizona Cardinals win. You want them to beat the Rams, no doubt. But don't put yourself in a position where that 100% has to happen. Go out and get the job done, and then hope a few chips fall your way so that you have a chance for a winner-take-all game against the Rams at SoFi Stadium. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow him at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, it's Matchup Tuesday. The key positional battles to watch when the Seahawks and the Bears spar at Soldier Field. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.